Hey, welcome to Lardon, the cooking show where you can either follow along and make delicious food, or be lulled to sleep by my droll voice. This week we are making the ultimate homemade tortellini, filled with butternut squash, goat's cheese, lemon, and finished with a hazelnut brown butter. I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and click that little bell so each time I upload, you'll get a notification. To start, grab a butternut squash, which are delicious at this time of year as they're just coming into season. You could use a pumpkin if you've got one laying around. Top, tail, peel and halve your butternut squash and then scoop out the insides. Cut the squash lengthways into strips, cut the strips into manageable sized pieces, and slice lengthways again, bring the strips together and cut them across to created dice. Once diced, pop them onto a sheet pan with some coarsely chopped garlic and give it all a good season with some salt and pepper. I'm also going to use some dried sage as I couldn't find any fresh in the supermarket, but by all means, if you can find fresh sage, use it. Roast at 160 for about 40 minutes. While our butternut squash is roasting, we can start making our pasta. Our rough guide is about 100 grams of flour per person, and for each 100 grams of flour we use 1 egg. I'm using 300 grams of flour, so I'm using 3 eggs. Create a well in the middle of your flour. Throw in a pinch of salt and a little glug of olive oil. Begin by beating the eggs, picking up little bits of flour with each stroke. Optionally, create a really small well like I did and have your eggs run all over the bench. If this happens to you, don't worry, just move your flour around to create a larger well around the eggs. Once it begins to get sticky, start incorporating the remaining flour using a bench scraper. You could use your hands if you haven't got one, but these are pretty cheap, so I would recommend picking one up. Once a shaggy rough dough has formed, we want to knead for about 10 minutes to develop the gluten. Just use the palm of your hand and force the dough into the countertop. Fold the dough back over itself and push back into the counter. The finished product should have a consistency similar to Play-Doh. It should be smooth, but not sticky. Wrap your dough in cling film and let it rest for about 30 minutes. Make sure the dough is fully covered, otherwise air will ruin the dough. Take a sheet pan out of the oven and allow this to cool completely. Once cooled, add to a food processor along with some Parmesan, salt and pepper, and some lemon zest. Blitz until smooth, but still remaining a coarse texture. Take some goat's cheese and mash it until smooth. Add this to your mixture and taste for seasoning. Mine did need a little more salt and some Parmesan. Set aside and leave to chill in the fridge. Once your dough is rested, cut the dough in half and cover the piece of dough you aren't using with some cling. Generously coat your countertop in flour. If you don't have one of these fancy flour spreaders that your mom gave you because she likes to offload anything she doesn't want in her house into yours, then by all means use your hands. We begin by laminating the dough. Roll it out, fold it back on itself, turn it sideways, and roll the dough out again. We want to do this about 3 times. I'm rolling this to the size of my pasta roller, but if you do not have one, fear not, this can be rolled out by hand, just use a rolling pin. Set the widest setting on your pasta roller and run the dough through twice. Knock down the setting by 1 click each time you roll the dough through. Repeat until you are 2 or 3 clicks from the thinnest setting. The pasta will probably get unmanageably long, so just cut the dough in half. You know the pasta will be at the right thickness when you can blow gently underneath and see it flutter. Lay your rolled dough on a counter and cover it in a little flour. Cut out circles with whatever size cutter you have. Naturally, the larger the circle, the larger the tortellini. Place an appropriate sized dollop of your butternut into the pasta and using some water, run your finger along the edge of the pasta. Fold it over and once sealed, fold it onto itself once more, crossing the corner over the next. Give it a little squeeze and you've just made your first tortellino. Repeat until you run out of dough or mixture, whichever happens first. Here's a close-up of how to do it. Fold the dough over the mixture, crimp along the edges, and fold once more onto itself. Bring the corners together, give it a little squeeze, and that's it. Once you have an army of tortellini assembled, We need to make the sauce. Lightly crush some hazelnuts in a mortar and pestle. Now, my camera wasn't recording when I made the sauce, but it's super easy, I promise you. Pop a knob of butter in a pan on a high heat until brown. Add a splash of wine, a squeeze of lemon, and throw your hazelnuts in. And that's it. Cook your pasta for 2 minutes in boiling salted water and mix with your sauce. Finish with some Parmesan over the top. And those are the ultimate homemade tortellini. Again, I would appreciate it if you could if you liked the video, dislike if you disliked it, and tell me why in the comments. Subscribe and click that little bell so each time I upload, you'll get a notification.